Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Alan Law. I'm Chairman, Overview and Scrutiny Management Commission. The members of OSMC in attendance this evening are Councillor Brooks, who has just sent his apologies for a personal reason. We have Councillors James Cole, Councillors Lee Dillon, Gareth Hurley, Councillors Tom Marino, Steve Masters, Gareth Simpson, and Tony Vickers. So other members in attendance this evening are Councillors Lynn Doherty, the Leader of Council, Councillor Ross McKinnon, and Councillor Howard Woolston. Council officers present to advise OSMC are Caitlin Bogus, Nick Carter, the Chief Executive, Shannon Coleman Slaughter, Melanie Ellis, Donna Fox, Susan Powell, Andy Sharp, and John Winstanley. We're also joined this evening by Superintendent Aziz from Thames Valley Police. I'm supported by Gordon Oliver as the clerk of the meeting and Phil Rubens as the Zoom host for this evening's meeting. I will now ask the clerk to run through some standard reminders about the way council meetings are conducted by Zoom. Over to you, Gordon.
Thank you. In addition to the points shown on the screen, if it becomes necessary for members to telephone into the meeting, you will not be able to signal to speak. So once everyone who has raised a Zoom hand has spoken, anyone who has telephoned in will be invited to speak in order. Any voting will be done by a show of physical hands, and if we need to adjourn the meeting for any reason, you will be advised of the revised time and date of the meeting. If it's a short adjournment, you'll be able to rejoin the Zoom meeting. Otherwise, a fresh appointment will be sent out. Do members have any questions about the way in which the meeting will be run?
Any questions? Don't see any. So Gordon, do we have any apologies other than Councillor Brooks?
Just Joseph Holmes.
Joseph Holmes, thank you very much. The minutes of the meetings, we have two meetings that the minutes are here from. The first one is from the 26th of January. And so what I'm going to do is just ask, is there anybody have any comments, any disagreements, any amendments, anything on the first set of minutes on the 26th? Okay. Not at all. Can I have a proposer, please, to accept those minutes and a seconder? I've got Councillor Vickers' hand moved first for proposing, yes, and Councillor Masters seconding. Can you just confirm that, gentlemen? Thank you very much. Okay, I think we all show of hands to accept those minutes. Okay, that's carried. Fine, thank you very much. I'd then like to go on to the minutes of the meeting on the 9th of February. Do we have any comments on those particular meetings? No. Okay. Could I therefore have I'm sorry, who said that?
Sorry, I'll bring it up under matters arising, Chairman. It was just, well, maybe just for clarity, in terms of the health scrutiny, we spoke about the numbers not being set, and that was supportive. It's page 19 of my document pack.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it recommends that we approve the terms of reference for the Health and Overview Scrutiny Committee. I mean, is that subject to the numbers not being set, though?
Yeah, I don't think they've been set yet.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
So the minute's accurate. Okay. If nobody's got any other points, don't see anybody waving, don't see any other hands. Can I have another proposer? Councillor Masters, another seconder. Councillor Cole. Thank you very much. If we all agree, can we show hands on the screen, please? That's fine. That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay. I'd like now to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is actions from...
Chairman, I do apologise. I have a matter of explanation, if you'd care to hear it.
A matter of explanation for what?
From the floor, as it were, Chairman.
On what topic?
On the Health Scrutiny Committee issue.
Let's leave that because it'll be coming up under, I think it's coming up under the next item, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, Chairman.
Okay, and if it doesn't, I'll come back to you. Okay, so basically the next item is actions from the previous minutes. Gordon, do you want to take us through those?
Yeah, sure. Most of the actions have been complete. The first one on there, number 18, that's just pending, and the report will be coming to the next meeting. Just scrolling down, item 34 is the only one that we haven't got any commentary on at the moment, and that's in relation to the performance report we received previously, where there was a suggestion that nationally independent shops have been better able to survive lockdown restrictions than chain stores, and just action on Catalan just to check if there was any local data to support that. And then the final, on the second page, there's an action for Councillor Hurley just to liaise with Head of Service about the leisure strategy once we've got the terms of reference agreed.
Okay, that's ongoing.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, fine. Okay, so Councillor Bridgman, I was wrong. There was nothing in the minutes about the health. And do you want to make your comment from the floor now, please?
Yes, Chairman. On the subject of the Health Scrutiny Committee, the paper that has come through and I believe will be part of the Monitoring Officer's report on the subject of committees to full council proposes a 5-member Health Scrutiny Committee with 3 Conservative members and 2 Liberal Democrat members. So obviously that is subject to council. But I just thought it might assist if I tell you what I know about that committee the proposals for that committee coming forward. Thank you,
Okay,
Chairman.
fine. Thank you very much. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so I'd like to move on to item 4, which is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? And no one's waving at this point in time. So I can take that as no declarations of interest. Are you aware of any, Gordon?
I haven't been advised of any, no.
Okay, fine, thanks. Any petitions? I'm not aware of any. Gordon?
We haven't received any petitions now.
Okay, so that's fine. We move on to item 6, which is the first report, which is the community safety update. And I believe we have a presentation. I'm looking for Superintendent Aziz. I don't see him on my screen. Maybe on my second screen. Let me just check. I don't have a visual. I see he's there. Oh, something's happening. Here he is. Okay.
Good evening, Chairman.
Welcome, Superintendent. So it's you and Chief Executive Nick Carter. I'm not quite sure who's doing what.
I think Nick's kicking off, and then I will take over midway through.
Okay, fine. Nick, would you like to take that item, please, and start?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Chairman. The slides that we're just going to talk through are actually within the agenda. So I don't think need to share the screen. So hopefully everybody's got sight of those. I'm just going to take you through the first 7 or so, and Superintendent Aziz will do the second half. So I'm just going to give you a bit of background really to the partnership itself. So the second slide is just really giving you a sense of what this short presentation will cover. But the third slide is talking about the community safety partnership, and that's what it is, a sort of legal term for the Building Communities Together partnership, and I'll explain a bit more about that in a moment. And you can see there the legislation on which the partnership is based and the legislation that affects effectively what the partnership needs to do, and some of that is actually quite current at the moment. We'll touch on that a little later. The partnership has, as you can see, been running now for many years, and you can see at the bottom of that the statutory partners that form part of the partnership. We do have a range of other partners that join the partnership, voluntary sector, etc., as well. So it's a statutory partnership. Just taking through on the next slide some of the changes.
Nick, is it possible to put these slides up on share screen? I'm sure I've got the hard copy in front of me and I'm flicking it through, but I'm not sure everybody else has.
Gordon, are you able to do that? Yeah. So if we go back up one, and that's the one. Yeah. So if we just quickly take you through there. This is quite a significant change that took place in 2017. Some members might remember brilliant West Berkshire, which was initiated probably 2 years prior to that, where we started working in some detail, in some depth around enhancing community engagement. And so in 2017, we brought that together with what was then called the Safe Communities Partnership and created what's now called the Building Communities Together Partnership. And that has added, if you like, to the statutory role that the Safe Communities Partnership has. And you can see there on the third bullet point, Safe Communities role, as I've just talked about, plus building community resilience. And what we also created at the same time was the Building Communities Together team, which is a multi-agency team, includes police and sovereign. And the BCT team were responsible for establishing the Community Support Hub, which was a key part, still is to some degree, a key part of our response to COVID. And underneath at the bottom there, you can see the vision for the partnership, and you can see through that that it's going a lot broader than simply the statutory role. So just in terms of where things currently are in terms of what we're about, we have to produce an annual strategic assessment, or at least that is the recommendation. So it's the Home Office in terms of government departments that sort of, if you like, keeps a close eye on what we're doing. We do that every 12 months, really to determine what our priorities should be, both in terms of community safety issues, crime issues, but also that broader agenda. And you can see there listed, I wrote, read it all out, some of the key issues that we are focused on at the moment. And we have a partnership plan, which dovetails with a range of the other council strategies and plans, which really sets out what it is we are seeking to achieve underneath that vision. And these are the objectives. So if you were looking at the plan, you would see our plan is drawn around these 4 objectives. And what we tend to do, or have tried to do of late, if the agenda allows it, is a meeting focuses on one of these particular objectives, just to sort of focus down on what we're doing. So you can see there the sort of breadth of what we are about. I'm going to let Superintendent Aziz take you through these. So this is really just sort of, if you like, getting into a little bit more detail, which members might like to understand in terms of some of the key issues out there in the community. And I might just come back at the end just to talk about where the partnership is currently going post-COVID, because we're sort of changing again. But I think what I'll do is I'll let Zahid take you through the next few slides first.
Okay, fine.
Chairman and members, thank you very much for allowing me to address you this evening. As Nick has said, the next few slides are just around some of the work we've been doing over the past 12 months, particularly around the first slide there, domestic abuse in West Berkshire, our approach to county drugs lines, violence and knife crime in particular, which has seen a very high kind of profile within the kind of wider media and national press, and antisocial behaviour, and some of the orders that we pursue in respect of addressing the antisocial behaviour issues within West Berkshire. Just to kind of put some context on where we are over the past year, obviously we've had COVID, a very kind of change and kind of changing landscape as we're moving forward. So we've had some significant challenges around staff, the number of staff that are in work, but also the way that we operate as well. So lots of changes in terms of our processes and procedures, in terms of how we operate. And demand has changed. There's a shifting demand for us in terms of COVID enforcement. Some crime elements have seen reductions, quite significant reductions overall, both across Thames Valley and also within West Berkshire. So areas like burglaries, for example, have gone down, I think almost 30% due to lockdown conditions. What we are seeing is the complexity of crime and the investigation of crime is much more intense. So officers are having to kind of pick up things and deal with them in a much more detailed and complex way, which takes much more time. And we've been operating within a kind of financial cuts over the past couple of years, but again, within the last year, those cuts have affected our kind of financial position. We have, as a result of Boris Johnson's 20,000 uplift of officers, have gained 5 officers within Vets Berkshire over the last year. So a small number, but still very welcomed. But the staff are very inexperienced, and we have some challenges around getting them upskilled as quickly as we can, so that we can meet the demands of what we anticipate will be a very busy summer as we kind of come out of lockdown into some sort of normal business environment. In terms of our approach, Nick will probably attest to this, that within Vets Berkshire, we've got a very strong partnership approach, and our kind of policing approach is very much built around the partnership process, around prevention, around safeguarding, and tackling kind of the kind of more deeper crime issues within our community, and supporting those families and individuals, whether they're juveniles, or whether they're young, or whether they're kind of more hardened criminals, to get them the support that they need. So quite a kind of wide-ranging and kind of deep approach to our kind of crime fighting approach. So moving on to slide 8, Gordon, if you could move us to the next slide, please. Yep. So looking at the domestic abuse picture, what we have seen is a reduction in domestic abuse between 2019 and 2020. Last year, we had 744 domestic-related incidents, which resulted in 329 arrests. That's 44% of all incidents that we attended resulted in an arrest. This year, we've seen a reduction in domestic incidents reported, but an increase in the number of arrests that we make. That's quite important, because what we know from evidence is that if arrests are made, then the likelihood is A, the victim's better supported, and B, we tend to get a better outcome in terms of investigation and prosecution. And therefore, one of the kind of key measures that we have is that we monitor the number of arrests that we make. So that's a kind of positive approach as we kind of move forward. Our positive outcomes as well have increased from last year to this year. Last year, there was 198 positive outcomes from the incidents reported. This year, the 198 positive outcomes reported compared to last year, where we had 149. So reducing numbers of incidents and better outcomes from those incidents and prosecution. Next slide, please. So in terms of county drug lines, this is a high risk area for the force and also for West Berkshire. Our priority crime team, which is a team of 9 officers, a mixture of detectives and uniformed constables and plainclothes officers. They work alongside our force operation tackling county drugs line, which is Operation Vanquish. And they have been busy over the last year. Of note is Operation Flip, which resulted in 17 arrests, seizure of cash of £4,500, and we recovered 5,000 drugs, £5,000 worth of drugs, after we executed 3 warrants at different locations across West Berkshire. We currently have 6 active drug lines within West Berkshire. These drug lines are monitored. They are tackled through intelligence building, building that kind of picture to the point where we can then secure warrants, and then we progress that towards the execution of warrants and hopefully making arrests and prosecution. So it's a longish process. We have some quite challenging organised crime groups as well active within West Berkshire. And again, the process is that we try and get as much intelligence before we're able to actually take active police action against them. From the kind of more recent operation that we had around county drugs lines, we've had 3 partial closure orders enforced in properties where the supply of drugs has taken place, and that's been within a kind of partnership context. Next slide. In terms of knife crime, as you'll be aware, this is a significant national problem, and you'll be aware of the incident in Reading where a young child was stabbed. So it's very much a focus for our force. It's a force priority. That's as I said, and we have created a violence reduction unit within the kind of a force structure to enable local delivery of the violence reduction plans across the force area. So within West Berkshire, myself and Nick, through the Community Safety Partnership, are working through a plan around how we will tackle violence reduction within the LPA. In terms of our processes around violence reduction, we have a very comprehensive system around reviewing all incidents that happen every 24 hours that are linked to violence. There's a sergeant's review, a detective sergeant's review that's done on that incident. And then we have our priority crime team to pick up any particular trends or significant individuals that we would want to have extra scrutiny around. And within that, we also have quite strong safeguarding processes, particularly when it comes to vulnerability and children. We've got to recognise the context of the violence crime within West Berkshire. If you compare ourselves to, for example, Reading, Milton Keynes, Oxford, for example, our violent crime numbers are relatively low. So we had 58 offences recorded between over 2021, which is the lowest in the force. But yeah, our outcome rates from those incidents that were recorded by ourselves sits currently at 41%. So a good outcome rate from a small number of offences. Next slide. Violent offences, that's the kind of numbers around there, 510 violent offences in 1920. It's reduced this year to 414, probably due, in the most part, due to COVID restrictions and the absence of the nighttime economy for most of the year. But we've had kind of good positive outcomes from those incidents, increasing from 20% last year to 29% this year. So again, a positive trend for the police and the local community here. Next slide. Antisocial behaviour. This is an ongoing process that sits within our neighbourhood teams. Within the town centre area, we have the Public Spaces Protection Order. That was initiated, I think, last year, just at the outset of COVID. And although it's been in place, there has been very limited enforcement, obviously, because the town centre and nighttime economy hasn't been vibrant. However, obviously, as we're moving out of it now, we still have that in place, and we will continue to enforce where we need to, and issue fixed penalty notices for those individuals that are breaching any orders. We've had, in the kind of more recent time, 8 initial house closure orders. These last for 3 months, and we've had extensions on a further 4 for further 3 months. And these have resulted in 5 arrests and charges for people breaching those closure orders. These orders are quite important because where we have a problem in a particular location or a street, the best solution for us is obviously A, to arrest the offenders, and B, to make sure that that particular location doesn't either get overused by other people or doesn't carry on being a problem. So the house closure orders for us is a fantastic tool to make sure that the problem doesn't persist, and those neighbours, those individuals in the street aren't suffering ongoing problems as a result of kind of police action that's maybe rest of the individuals concerned. We've issued 2 criminal behaviour orders. These are very effective when it comes to managing those persistent individuals in the community who commit crime and have an impact on our kind of community safety. And we have a powerful arrest on the back of the community behaviour orders, and that's resulted in 7 arrests of those breaches over the last year. And then finally, the community protection warning notices. Again, good use of these. We've issued 9 over the last year, 2 notices, and 1 person in charge for breaching those notices. Next slide. So finally, just to kind of give you some sort of context around the partnership working. As I said at the outset, a lot of effort has gone into our approach around safeguarding, prevention, target hardening. So whether it's domestic abuse, we have campaigns around increasing awareness of reporting domestic abuse, and training for our champions, both within the partnership and within the police as well. The County Drugs Line has had a high profile both within the local press and within the partnership. And we can manage a lot of our intelligence processes and the problem solving through the council police MAPS meeting, and community conversations which happen to try and reach out to our kind of more remote communities within our communities to get their voice heard, so nobody is excluded from our approach to policing and safeguarding community safety. And finally on there is the enforcement around house closures, public spaces, protection orders, and the CPWNs. These are a fantastic tool for us to ensure that those places, those locations don't become ongoing problems. So that's in a nutshell some of the kind of headline points around the last year that we have been active in. By the way, I didn't introduce myself. I'm the new superintendent. I joined on the 4th of January, so it's relatively new to West Berkshire, but I'm familiar with the area because I worked here about 10 years ago for a short spell, so I'm familiar with the location, the dynamics, and the kind of geographical space of West Berkshire. Yep, so I'm happy to take any questions and hope that was useful.
Thank you, thank you, Superintendent. Before I've got a few hands coming up, but Nick, did you want to come back in, or are you happy to go straight to questions? Just
one final comment from me, Chairman, if I may, and that's just to say we're in the process of actually reshaping the partnership once again. So members will be aware of what's happened during COVID. We've got a recovery strategy. We've got a new communications engagement strategy. And that work that we've been doing over the last few years around community engagement is now going to be picked up by a new community alliance. So the Building Communities Together partnership will probably go back to being a community safety partnership, because that community alliance is going to take a lot of the heavy lifting around community engagement. So we really want to sort of ramp that community engagement work up even more, build on it further, and we're going to put together a separate alliance to do that, which will probably have a lot more community representatives on it. So we're sort of changing things again. I just wanted to make members aware of that. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Nick. I've got, so far I've got 3 hands up, and I'll take them in order. Gordon, if you could just keep an eye on it, make sure I don't miss anyone. I've got Councillor Vickers. Tony, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm not sure who this question's addressed to, but whoever wishes to take it, please. I mean, it started with a quote from one of Nick Carter's slides, which says that this dovetails in with other local strategies and plans. But then it also arose in Superintendent Aziz's presentation when he talked about public spaces protection order. I thought the S in that PSPO was public safety, and the slide talks about it as though there's only one in the district, but I believe there are others. And the point I want to make is that there is a clash rather than a dovetailing between our planning policies and our transport policies when it comes to PSPOs that result in closing off routes which are useful for permeability, to encourage people to use active travel to get around the town and the district for that matter, when often some quite minor antisocial behaviour takes place, and then you find what used to be called a gating order and then is succeeded by a PSPO. So I would like to see some better process, because on one that came up recently, which Councillor Masters and the leader are probably aware of because it was their ward, there was no involvement of the transport or rights away people at all. It was that's conflict which is there and needs to be managed, I think, better. You know, we spend a lot of effort in our planning policy making sure that we've got good access into new developments for people on foot and by bike. But then if they are closed off, you've defeated that object, which is clear and very reasonable in those strategies. So I would like the balance to be a bit more level, and for discussions when these things come up to involve planning and transport officers somehow. That's my question. What's the answer?
Well, I actually didn't quite hear a question there, Councillor Vickers.
Well, the question is, can we review the process whereby we introduce public safety protection orders and review them so that there is an involvement from the transport and planning side as well as public safety?
Okay, fine. Understand the question now. Who wants to take that? Nick, Superintendent?
I'll have a go, Chairman. I'm aware of what Councillor Vickers is referring to. I have to say I don't think there are many of those orders. They are few and far between, and there was very extensive consultation on it. That's the other thing to say. And obviously it is driven by safety concerns. So you've got sort of competing issues at play. I'll happily take away and see whether there is an ability to involve others, and I just need to determine whether it's a statutory process dictated by legislation, in which case that may limit it. But if I could come back to you with a note on that, Councillor Vickers, I'll do so. But Susan Powell, who's actually on the call, is actually a lot closer to this than
more
me.
about it. So,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks very much. I've got two people. I've got Councillor Dillon followed by Councillor Simpson. Councillor Dillon, Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The first question is just the reporting numbers on domestic abuse and the amount of calls coming in has decreased. I saw some figures this morning from an organisation within West Berkshire who have had an increase in domestic abuse calls, and I think it was something that we were all concerned about at the start of COVID, and then we were relieved in the first sort of quarters when that data started coming through. Sorry, my dog's decided to start barking now after being silent all evening. And so I'm just wondering, in terms of the whole partnership, linking in with all the other domestic abuse charities that are operating within West Berkshire, or the organisations in West Berkshire are signposting to. So, for example, local housing associations will be signposting to certain charities as well, and how we're linking in and building that intel up. And I just wonder, is there a view that the decrease in reporting directly to the police is because of a lack of opportunity potentially, that if you're in your property with the perpetrator, it's harder potentially to make that call to a police force? The other one was on one of the slides, it spoke about the overall purpose of understanding the community and about helping everybody. And so I just wondered about how we're reaching out to those ethnic and diaspora communities. And then the last comment from me, Chairman, is on the violent crime figures. It's about a 20% decrease, but West Berkshire's been in lockdown for about 8 months in total, if you take the pre-Christmas sort of mini lockdown as well. And so is a 20% reduction what you would expect for the closure of the nighttime economy? Or do those violent crimes also include domestic abuse within those? And just if you could give some examples of the positive outcomes. You talk about them throughout the slides. Is it positive outcomes for the victim or positive outcomes for the police force?
Okay, it's quite long in there, Councillor.
Yes, go ahead.
Pick up those points. In terms of domestic incident reporting, it's recognised that when people are within the home, sometimes they are unable to report, so that there's a barrier around their ability to almost kind of escape the space in order to kind of get access to the help that they need. I'm not sure. I can't give you a definitive whether the numbers are our numbers in terms of reductions are reflective of this. What the national picture was, there was an increase in domestic reporting, but our numbers suggest that within West Berkshire, those numbers have reduced. And when I did look at the numbers, I did query whether they were accurate or not. And that is an accurate reflection on where we are within West Berkshire. I think some of our local police areas have had increases in domestic violence numbers. So I'm fairly confident that the numbers that we have are a true reflection of our recording process. But accept your point, there may be occasions where somebody within a domestic environment unable to have the freedom to leave the home under normal circumstances, go to work, for example, disclose things to a colleague. Those opportunities perhaps are less so, but I can't be certain.
I think probably what I was getting to is I wonder what that number, that underreporting number is. I suppose, you know,
I
because of
see, yeah.
COVID. You know, is it another 10%, 20%, you know, that's out there that's not reported in?
It's difficult to say
suppose
without
time will tell.
Yeah, some detailed kind of analysis around that. In terms of the hard to reach communities, as we like to call them, the police, there's a lot of work going on within our neighbourhood teams, along with Susan Powell's team, to understand where our communities are, how to engage with them. The force is looking at a tactical neighbourhood plan that will include an element around how we identify, reach out and listen to our more hard to reach communities. So that is a work in progress. It's obviously currently ongoing anyway, but it'll be much more of a focus as we kind of move forward into 21-22. So we've got a much more structured approach to that kind of a landscape scoping and making sure that we are taking everybody's needs, etc., into account. The violent crime figure, the final point you make, Councillor, that doesn't include the domestic violence. They're a separate category that we'd fall under. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Superintendent. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. This is one for Superintendent Aziz, and it's slide 9, the county drug lines. Now, I'll preface my question with the fact that I'm a complete novice on these matters, but just instinctively, the results you're getting in terms of cash recovered, amounts of drugs recovered, and the number of arrests and stuff seem very, and house closures, seem very small compared with what you read in the national press, which, but then on the other hand, your team is small. There's 9, I think you said 9 policemen.
Yes.
And so I'm questioning why is it so slow? Is it so low? Is it that's the reality? We're out away from big metro centres where the concentration of stocks possibly lies, and or that you're lying in wait, trying to build your intelligence portfolio and waiting to move in for the big one. Is there any kind of obvious explanations, please?
Yeah, it's a combination of both, actually. We suffer from an influx of county drugs lines. So from London, from Reading, from Bristol. So they come from almost every direction into West Berkshire, into our kind of main local hubs. And they exist or operate within small time frames of 2 days, 3 days, maybe extending up to 2 weeks, and then they tend to leave and then re-emerge sometime down the line. It's quite difficult to gather the intelligence in such a short space of time to then execute in a timely fashion our warrants and time it so that when we get there, the drugs are in place or the cash is in place when we actually do the warrants. So it's often luck, but obviously it's based on an intelligence picture. By the way, those numbers are just from one operation upflip. We've had several operations over the last year. I know of one where we recovered £45,000 worth of cash. So it's probably not indicative of the whole year's picture, but it's a difficult thing to tackle, county drugs lines. The main thing around county drugs line is the vulnerability of individuals that are being exploited, whether it's children that are trafficking the drugs or whether it's those residents who have been overpowered by these criminal gangs and their home, their space, their vulnerability is being exploited and used by these nefarious individuals. So it's in a nutshell, it's a difficult thing to tackle. It very much depends on the intelligence picture, the process around securing warrants based on the intelligence can sometimes be challenging, but we will make always the effort. Where we have particularly any form of vulnerability, we will, if not enforce, we will certainly try to disrupt by other means, if that makes sense.
Thank you very much.
Superintendent, Councillor Cole. James.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a really positive set of reports as far as I'm concerned. I too picked up on the question of domestic abuse and the comparison to the rest of the country, where the rest of the country seems to be reporting things getting worse. can we in fact infer that this partnership is helping in respect of domestic abuse? I know Councillor Dillon has sort of questioned whether there was a complete report, but it's probably reasonable to suggest that totally out of line in terms of reporting with other comparative authorities. Is our partnership having an effect?
Before you answer that, Superintendent, Councillor Dillon just reminded me on it by chat that he had asked a question about examples of positive outcomes. And I think that may be the appropriate time to remind you of that question, because
Yes.
I tie it back into Councillor Cole's question on outcomes on domestic abuse.
Yeah, so outcomes are charging decisions that we as a police make or the CPS will make on our behalf. So if there's a positive charge decision at the end of the investigation, that's a positive outcome. So we could make an arrest, the investigation could proceed, but ultimately either we don't have the evidence or insufficient evidence and we are unable to charge. That would be a non-outcome case, if that makes sense. So it's the prosecution or it's the charge to go to court is the test of a positive outcome. So what was the other question? The last point? Oh yeah, in terms of our partnership,
Yes.
whether that was working. I've only been in post for 3 months. What I have observed is that we have a very strong partnership. We have strong safeguarding processes in place for our victims. We have a very positive approach to encouraging domestic abuse reporting. And I think the combination of active enforcement, help when people need it. So hopefully, but before it gets to the point where somebody becomes a victim, they're able to seek that support and perhaps even leave that kind of a volatile domestic relationship. And where they then do become victims, there's a wraparound service through the partnership which supports the individual and hopefully removes them from that domestic environment, that then don't become victims again. So I think from my early scoping of where we are in West Berkshire, that's the kind of reason for our success.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Just before, I've got no other questions from members. I've just got a point for myself on a question. The point I'd like to make is you talked about, obviously I know you're only in the job a few months, and like everyone else new in the job, you sit back and look and figure out, as you use the term landscape scoping. I think we've already got a very good mechanism for that called the NIG. But I do sense that my local NIG hasn't been as engaged over the last 18 months as it probably was in previous times. So my comment would be, I would hope you would give a lot more priority because the NIG with the representatives from the immediate local councils and the parish councils is in my opinion, an excellent source for keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on. Below the general things like empty lines and that sort of stuff. That's my point. My question is, what's happened to rural crime? I notice it hasn't been mentioned, and I did know that Anthony Stansfield, the police crime commissioner, used to make rural crime a major priority. But what's happened to it? So for the past year, there's been, obviously we've had crime, but it's been limited. Because of COVID, there's been kind of a limited police activity because obviously we have to focus on our priorities, which are around domestic and safeguarding, etc. Not that the crime has been neglected, but where crime does occur, we've had that kind of investigation ongoing. What the force is doing is that a rural crime task force is being established. And the current figures are there'll be 1 inspector, 2 sergeants, and a team of 18 officers with some investigative capacity as well. And they will support the kind of 5 or 6 larger rural LPAs, local police areas, where rural crime is a significant factor. So we will have the support of a kind of force level task force
that will have the expertise, the training, will have a good handle on cross-border offenders, and they'll be able to work with our partners in Hampshire, in Swindon, and north of the Force as well, to try and tackle this. From a local LPA perspective, we have 2 dedicated officers who are rural crime spots and a PCSO as well, and they're carrying on with their engagement with the rural communities. So I recognise for the last year, there probably wasn't a huge amount of effort put in, additional effort put in, apart from the basic investigation of crimes. I'll have to check what the crime figures were over the last year in terms of there being a Skype or not. I have commissioned some crime analysis around the volume of rural crime and when and where it's happening. That's come back with some interesting information. It's gone back for further work because it didn't give us just enough information to start planning our kind of policing activity. But there are peaks in certain months of the year, as you would probably imagine, with the cropping, etc. And there are offenders and locations which are repeat and kind of vulnerable to kind of rural crime offenders. So I think moving forward with the additional task force that would be in support of our work and our kind of crime analysis, we will be much more active around that in the coming year.
Well, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Members, I don't see any other questions. And that was a very interesting presentation. And I know by the questions, it has created a lot of interest. And I'd like to get Superintendent Aziz and Nick for taking us through that. Thank you. You're welcome to stay or you're welcome to go, Superintendent.
I've been on since 7 o'clock this morning, so I might just decide to go.
Yeah, you've probably got a few crimes to chase up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for attending.
Bye-bye.
The next item on the agenda, number 7, is entitled Traded Services. As you will have seen from some exchange of emails that particularly Andy Sharp and I have had over the last week or so, a little bit of a communications issue, I think. We did ask Andy at the last, when he presented in February, I think, to come back and give us a lot more details on traded services. I think we had also wanted a few more details on commercialization in general, but that got lost in the translation, so to speak. But the bulk of this is traded services and traded services in education, this paper. So we'll see how that goes tonight, and I'll hand over to Andy. Are you leading it, or is it Donna? Or?
Thank you, Chairman. If I may, I'll just introduce it, and then Donna will pick up and take things forward from there. Thank you.
Okay.
As you said, this is focused towards education traded services. We can obviously provide some other details around some of the other commercial activities at a future meeting if that is something that you would like to see. And perhaps we can have a conversation offline about specifically what you'd like to see around that, Mr. Chairman. Okay. But on that, I'll pass to Donna to take through the detail of this particular report. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Chairman. I'm Donna Fox, Principal Advisor for School Improvement, Governance and Community Learning. And just because I like to be busy, I'm also the lead on traded services for education as well. And obviously you've had the report. There are just 4 highlights I'd like to give really. And the first one is in section 3 in the executive summary. Traded services are under the governance of the Commercialisation Board. And we're very grateful for that, because the Commercialisation Board does provide some structure, for comment and for challenge and for clarification. And certainly working with colleagues in the Commercialisation Board has helped the traded services lead to think about what they're doing and how they're doing it. Section 4 takes you through the background and the range of services that are currently provided to schools. There are 3 tables or charts in that section. Apologies if figure 1 looks a little crowded. The purpose of that is just to give some sort of trend analysis for each service around forecasts over the last 3 or 4 years. But you can see there the expenditure, and the forecasted expenditure is also noted.
Now, Donna, if I may just interrupt you again, it's the same interrupt I had with Nick. Do you have this available on a screen to share with us?
I believe Gordon has it. Is that right, Gordon? It's in the pack.
Can you try and share the pack? Hang on.
I'm not all of us have got the pack available. Any chance of making that a little bit bigger?
The view options, yeah.
There we go. Okay.
Thank you. Always a great relief.
Oops. Let me know which page you'd like.
Yeah, thank you. So page 44, 45, Gordon, thank you. I was just going to highlight the purpose of those figures there. So this figure 1 here is it's literally a comparison and trends over time rather than an analysis graph. Figure 2 and figure 3 on the following page show you in percentage terms and in pounds value terms the forecast for 2021. And I have pointed that out in the report. This is a February look at data and forecasting. So we've got the end of the year to go through yet. In section 4.8, a little further on, still in section 4, there are some comments here from the group, the Traded Services Group, about expansion and viability tipping points. And I think the thing I'd like to point out here is that we all recognise as service leads that we're not experts in commercialisation or trading. And one of the helpful things that's been commissioned through the Commercialisation Board, and it's happening in the summer, is training for every service lead. And I think that training will help us to look at these issues and look at these tipping points and give us some thought about where we go forwards as a group and as a trading arm for education services in particular. And my final comment, and it's not about anywhere in the report, is just to acknowledge that from that training, I think there is opportunity for us to formulate some policy statement, certainly working with our governance and strategies colleagues, about the role of traded services for West Berkshire Council. Who are we? What's our identity? And what we are intending to do. Very much at the moment, we are keen to build the reputation of the council by the quality of the traded services we provide. By default, they're external because they are out of the services that are offered in the council. And it's to look at that reputation of the council with schools. And ultimately for education, it's to look at every learner and make sure that they can have the best possible chance of fulfilling what they need to do, fulfilling their full potential and future ambitions. Thank you, Chairman. Happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you. Can we go back to full screen? Before I ask any members to make any points or questions, I've got a question of clarification I'd like, please, Donna. On the charts, over to the extreme right of all the charts is an item called schools self-funding provision. How is that? I don't understand. How is that a traded service? Could you please explain that?
An insurance service is a buyback service for schools. So schools will buy back into insurance, and there are very many insurances that are bought back there. And schools choose either to buy back. So, for example, building insurance, schools will buy back, or they'll use the DFE RPA insurance. So there is an option to buy in or buy out. You need insurance, but where you get it from, and I guess a little bit like your home insurance, there is a choice about where you purchase that from and the service you get it.
And that's what self-funding means, is it?
Yes, it's the insurance. It's the sort of which I think I mentioned in the report is technically not comparable to some of the other services because insurance is a different animal, as we both know.
Okay, fine. Thank you for clarifying that. Oh, I got several people on. I know Councillor Simpson was first. I've then followed by Councillor Cole and Councillor Dillon. Councillor Simpson. Councillor Simpson, you need to unmute.
Right, thank you, Chair. When I read this paper, to me, it was a kind of brief summary, inevitably skimming over the top of things and examples of data. But in terms of advancing the skill level and the professionalism, it seemed to me there were missing things. Now, I'm totally ignorant about the education function and how it operates, but you have 20 products at the moment, of which one is going. I think the one that the chair spoke about, and for next year. But each of these they're very different in character. And there's a mix of inputs, both West Berks officials and skilled staff, bought in professional services and commissioned services and goods. And yes, you're looking at some of the declines that you've been having, and hey, we're losing business to some of the bigger schools, I guess. But there's no discussion of the unique selling propositions to the schools, which anybody in marketing knows. There's modesty in what you've written up, which is that you're not experts in this, in the analysis. But listen, I've had 20 to 30 years of marketing and finance experience in industry. A lot of marketing is just common sense, and you can study things. And for example, where you have a very intensive product, which is commissioning group intensive, you're into saying, well, we failed to get it there because that school's gone into an academy, and that academy has been aggressive and so forth. Well, I'm sure the knowledge rests within your community of education people. It's just providing the space that people can put their ideas down and get it into place. You allude to compromises over the pricing policy, in that you have to compromise. I assume that's with the smallest, very much smaller schools, the primaries, which you're trying to keep it going, even though they're not a single stream running close to 200. And now, in my days in industry, we had account managers to manage the compromises. And I asked the question of you: do you have a set individuals within your education organisation who are looking after specific schools? And do you have product specialisms? Because the knowledge is there, I'm convinced. And I think I'll leave it there, apart from the fact that I think very simple analysis of your history on this year's results, or you might like to wait until the year end, which isn't exactly far away. Just if you could do staff work where you've got, is it 43 schools? So you've got a 43 by 19 product participation rate, and you build that up of what you've done in this year, and you perhaps build another one which shows your failures. And I think out of that, you may find that you might want to run a Pareto analysis and perhaps lose a few of these products, because in actual fact, they're too low value added, and let them go and go for something bigger, which is more of a higher status, and so forth. So I've posed a number of questions there, and I don't know that we have much time, but
you've posed a number of questions. You made several points about analysis, Councillor, which are valid. I think one of the most important questions you've asked, because it's an old one that's been hovering around for a few years: do we have account managers?
Thank you, Chairman. We have our individual finance managers for our teams, our education team. So they are under Melanie's team, and Melanie's here this evening. But in terms of a trading account manager, there's one business trading account manager who works in school improvement. She offers her services to other services, and her skills are particularly good because she works with external groups from other local authorities who look at trading. So her knowledge is very good. I am really grateful for your background and your understanding, Councillor Simpson. I wonder, Andy, if Councillor Simpson ought to be part of our training team, because that was excellent. And you say it so naturally and so easily. And I think when service leads are involved in lots of other things, trading is a part of their role. It's not totally their role. But actually, I sit and listen to people like you, and I think that all sounds really simple. And I do hold firm on the impact I think the training will give those service leads. It will give us our our bravery, you know, to sound, do all those things that you've mentioned. Our account manager is incredibly important in the school improvement team, and we have used her across services more in the last year, knowing that she has that ability to look more forensically, if you like, at what traded services can do. But yes, thank you.
Okay. I've got Councillor James Cole, followed by Councillor Dillon. James.
Thank you, Chairman. I have several short questions. I see you're operating on cost plus 10. The building trade, for example, they probably expect more like 15, 20 if they get away with it. Is 10 what the market will bear? To add to our chairman's question on this, on the self-funding side, I have to ask you, well, you say not comparable to what? How are we supposed to look at that? Later on, there's talk about reduction in the offer of insurance buybacks to schools. Are we creating that reduction in the offer? Are we offering less? What's happening here? And the last bit, do we offer our services to the private sector?
Yeah, okay. Excuse me, I've just written all that down so I can cover all of those. The plus 10%, and is it more, can the market bear more? We have a decision to make in traded services about whether we operate for profit or whether we operate at a tolerating level for schools to continually buy in, because the result of our work, particularly in school improvement, is that schools achieve a good Ofsted grade. So when I talked about the reputation of the council and the reputation of schools, there are decisions each service has to make. And what was expertly pointed out at the beginning is there are a range of different services here, and you can't compare like for like in that service. So we've talked in our traded service group about what that 10% over what we're asking, and what would that profit look like, and do we need to make, or do we want to make that profit in some services, because schools will simply go somewhere else. However, when we know we're operating or giving a service, a bespoke service, that's an opportunity where we can increase our costs and we can work beyond that percentage. And to link that to the private sector, Councillor Cole, we've got, particularly in school improvement, we've got buybacks from independent schools and buybacks from a Berkshire multi-academy trust that's not part of the West Berkshire group. So we are beginning to attract some services out of traditional West Berkshire area, if you like. The insurance is a difficult one, because the insurances pay out if you need them to pay out, because you buy them in for a nominal fee. And that's where I say that's my understanding of comparable and non-comparable. That probably shows my ignorance and that I need the training, but that's where they are so different from the other services that we have on offer. And I think the reduction in insurance buybacks is about schools looking out to the private market, not looking in, and finding deals they believe are better and better suited to them. The DfE has a deal about insurances that's not the same as the West Berkshire insurance deal, but it's a competitive market, and that's, you know, our traded services, isn't it? The ethic and ethos of traded services.
Are we acting as a broker there?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so.
I am an insurance person, so.
Are you?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dillon.
You want your commission, Donna, don't tell him. I see. No, thank you for the report. And I appreciate what the chairman said at the top of the meeting, and Andy as well. And I think we do need to come back and look at that wider issue of commercialisation across the council. And I wonder actually if some of the comments from members today almost sit better at that level of conversation. So I think I wouldn't disagree with anything that Councillor Simpson said in regards to thinking about your business model and your business strategy going forward. But I think as councillors, we would expect to see that across all commercialisation centres within the council, underpinned by a common strategy there. And maybe Ross, Councillor McKinnon can talk about that as I think the chair of the commercialisation board. in particular to the schools, I think the one thing that I was thinking about when I was talking about tipping points and viability was that yield. So, you know, how many academies have to be created and, you know, at the rate of losing business for us to then start thinking that we've got issues about sustaining that trading service. I was wondering, just with your experience, I appreciate that we're not at year end yet, but is everything looking that it's on trend and expecting to be where you're going to end up, or are we going to see a much varied picture from what you've shown us on the graphs? And then my last one was just on the projected income. So at the top of page 46, it says 250k projected income, and then it talks about using that to focus on reducing the attainment gap, which I appreciate is a key KPI. Is that money, just for clarity of the way the sentence is being structured, is all of that money kept within the education service, or is it used on council KPIs across a number of service or directorates?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Councillor Dillon. Just to take those in turn, how many academies or schools do we need to lose to be worried? That depends on the service you provide. For example, if you offer a payroll service, the payroll service has to first look at how many buybacks it receives, so that there's an end date, so the schools apply for that. And then they look at the cost they are going to charge for each school, divided by the number of staff they've got. In school improvement, we look at our buybacks, and because we have a flexible service where we use head teachers as school improvement officers, we use more or less of those, so our staffing remains secure. And our flex is really quite big. For human resources, as another example, when 2 or 3 academies or schools go, that causes an issue because there is then not enough work for those. That's where it becomes different services. The choice and the work with academies has been really positive in the last 18 months. We offer a traded service to every school in West Berkshire. We do not believe in labels, we believe in children. And so any academy in any school can buy back. And I believe that's been the attraction of our extended work with academies. Under the school improvement banner, I've worked with all of the academies in West Berkshire in the last 18 months. And that was not happening before that. Because we don't, as I say, we don't see labels, we see children. And I think academies will pick and choose a service. I think they'll pick and choose what we offer. They are present in most of our education meetings now where we talk to head teachers, which is great. And so the relationships element that traded services have brought back to schools has been really, really positive, really, really very positive. But you're right, there's a risk every year when it's buyback time of how many people are buying back and what does that look like for us. Yes, absolutely. We need to bring in that money. And the projected income, I think we are not worried about the end of year. There are some projected incomes that are not going to happen because of COVID. And some of the original plans around spending the money for some services are going to be about COVID recovery. So they're going to have to do that. The 30k for school improvement is already funding 2 pupil premium champions, primary and secondary, who are working in schools on the disadvantaged charter.
Go ahead.
Yeah, could I just wanted sorry, you've now said 30k. My question now, but doesn't need to be answered tonight, is what's the other 220k being spent on then, Andy, of that projected income, if 30k is only for the attainment gap project? Sort of, I think in the report it makes it sound like it's a more sizable chunk, in fairness. And then you make a really honest assessment in your report, Donna, which is about not having the specialism. And this isn't a new idea, but I know it's one that Councillor Hilary Cole shares with me, but about getting that real specialism brought into the council to help coordinate all of the services, you know, across all the directorates. I think you'd find an open door from many members to support that recruitment piece.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, I don't have any other questions. Nobody wants to make any more points. So I'd like to thank you, Donna, for you clearly know your stuff. That came across, so appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'd now like to move on to the next item, which is the COVID income risks. We did ask I can't remember, it was a couple of OSMCs ago, to investigate the impact of COVID on our income streams. Obviously, the big one is parking, but there were other income streams to be looked at. And I believe, Melanie, are you taking us through that?
Yes, yes,
Go
thank you.
ahead. You've got the chair.
Okay, so yes, so this was requested by a previous OSMC meeting. Just as a bit of background, the government provided three main sources of COVID funding during the year. We've had non-ring fenced funding of 9.6 million, which has gone towards our extra expenditure. We've had.
Have you got, Melanie? Just let me interrupt again. Have we got slides to look at here? Is there...
No, just the paper. There's no slides. No.
Gordon, is it possible to show the relevant pieces of paper for the report?
Okay, I'm just on probably 5.2 at the moment.
Yeah, fine. I think it does help. I mean, most of our members will have this, but any of the public looking in not have the paper in front of them.
Okay. So yes, so we've had specific COVID funding for grant schemes that the government has set up, such as self-isolation support or infection control, that kind of funding. And then one we're looking at in this paper is that we've had an income compensation scheme. So where we've suffered income losses due to COVID-19, there's a scheme, and we've made 2 claims so far, and the third claim covering the remainder of this year, the year that's just finished, is due in the next couple of weeks. And how it works is that the council is expected to fund the first 5% of the budget that there's been an income loss against. And then after that, we do get reimbursed for 75% of what is left. So at the moment, we've sort of lost about 4.4 million, but we're expecting to be reimbursed to the tune of about 2.2 million against that. So if I just move on to section 5.3, it just shows there the main areas where we've lost income. We're not allowed to claim for commercial income losses, and there are a few other restrictions, but the list below are the major areas where we've been impacted with COVID. And as you can see, car parking is the biggest one of those. So if we move on to section 5.5, so we talk about the mitigations. The first mitigation is that we've had the income compensation scheme, and we've also been provided with non-ring fenced funding for COVID for next year as well. So we've overall, with the expenditure we've been compensated for and the income loss, we've got sufficient for everything that we've lost. In the MTFS, that's our medium-term financial strategy, we have made provision for future years if any of these COVID income stream losses become a more permanent effect. So what we've got in there is £900,000 at the moment to cover mainly car parking, where we potentially can't see that recovering in the longer term. And the third type of mitigation is through individual service areas. And the areas of greatest uncertainty here are car parking and leisure services. One other point to make, just the last point there on 5.8, is that some demand for services has been suppressed through COVID, and we could see some short-term gain in the next financial year where some services are able to catch up. And we'll know more of that as we come into the new financial year. So I think that's all I wanted to cover. So just if there's any questions.
Okay. Councillor James Cole, you were hand up first. Go ahead, James.
Thank you, Chairman. That graph of yours shows that we're actually worse off than the average, apparently, average unitary. Are we more dependent on the parking than the other unitaries? What's caused?
I'm not sure how the other unitaries have actually done in specific elements like their car parking. Everyone's got a different mix. I could probably look into the figures that went into that graph and come back with something that explains that further, if that's something that would be helpful.
I think it would, yes.
Okay.
So that, James? Lee, Councillor Dillon?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just on the income parking, almost that risk fund for decreasing, what was just sort of a flat rate applied across all our car parks, or was there more thought that actually, our car parks in Thiel and Pangbourne might get more use because people are trying to get out into the rural countryside, whereas actually some of our town centre car parks might suffer? Just wondering the rationale, almost the formula behind the decision, really.
Okay, so is this on the decision that whereby we're thinking there's a £900,000 sort of permanent loss in parking income? Is that what you're
that's it, madam.
Okay, yeah, again, I'd have to look into the actual calculations behind and come back on that.
Oh, thank you.
Okay,
sorry, Chairman. Sorry, this my general comment was, I mean, if you look at Appendix A, it's really enlightening in just how wide the impact is across the council. I mean, even though some of them are small pots, you've got from weddings to sports pitches, to car parking, a real wide sweeping impact across all service areas there.
Yeah, leisure centres, yeah. I was just wondering if John Winstanley could shed light on the parking question.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of sat, I looked at it with the parking team, Councillor Dillon, and it was probably very much led by what was going on in the town centres, which is where the bulk of our income comes from. But I do agree that it will, there will be differences in certain car parks, but I think we kind of felt that the town centre car parks was going to be the sort of the predominant factor in that. But yeah, we can have a look at our calculations and share that.
Okay, good. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Councillor Simpson.
Yes. These things are horribly interconnected, and I was wondering, do you have some fundamental assumptions which you're projecting for online shopping going up versus what I call B&M, bricks and mortar shopping, and your forward projection across 22 through to 23, and because that covers car parking, it also covers the risks on business rates, because and that seems a very big interrelationship. And maybe in your assumptions, are you cross-correlating it to the decline in footfall, which is another expression of it, so that you've got a mix of that?
I don't think we're as advanced in our forecasting at this point from that, because obviously we're still just potentially starting to come out of the impact of the COVID pandemic. So that will be something that we'd have to be looking at going forwards as we reflect on how we've been affected.
Okay.
Yeah, and obviously we're relying quite a lot on central government covering off a lot of the falls. I guess the risk, Councillor McKinnon, is that that support will not continue indefinitely.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, it's worth, and good evening, everyone. It's worth mentioning that the central government support we've had this year to cover these income losses has been extensive, not just from the income replacement scheme, which doesn't cover the lot, it's 75% plus and minus a little bit on the formula. But the non-ring fence funding we've had has been great. That's made the financial position of the council, certainly this year and next year, much more benign than it would have been otherwise. You're quite right to point out the risk. Support in this year's budget is 3.2 million of non-ring fence funding again. So certainly for the start of the year, we're in a good position. I've got every faith that our government will continue to support us.
Good. Yeah, good. I hope your faith is realised. Okay. Thank you very much for that. I don't think we have no more other questions on it. I don't see anyone. So thank you very much, Melanie, for doing that. I think you're going to be up later on as well, aren't you, on some of the financial stuff. The next item on the agenda is the Leisure Strategy Task Group scoping. We've agreed to act as a critical friend to the Leisure Task Group, putting together the leisure strategy. And Gordon, Gordon has presented in the paper here a set of terms and conditions, objectives for the task group. Gordon, would you like to take us through that? We need the commission to approve these.
Yes, at the last meeting, we agreed to set up the task and finish group. So just to review the draft leisure strategy. So as you say, the scope in terms of references set out in Appendix A for members to consider and approve. It's proposed that the task group would act as a critical friend, as you say, reviewing the draft strategy in the light of current guidance and best practice, as well as the local evidence that's been collected to date and any additional evidence that the group will pick up on. Particular areas of concern are ensuring that the consultation and engagement has been sufficiently wide-ranging and ensuring that there is good evidence about provision and demand locally for different leisure services and about any barriers that are faced by particular groups who want to engage in leisure services. Also ensuring a clear rationale for any major investments that the council is wishing to make into larger leisure facilities. So it's understood that leisure strategy may not be available for review until the summer, but the group should be able to, it may not be able to report back until the autumn, if that's the case.
Thank you, Gordon. Can I just clarify with Councillor Wollaston? Who's leading this leisure? Is it Matt Pearce?
Yes, Chair, it's Matt Pearce.
Okay, fine.
Was that his responsibility these days?
Okay. Yeah, I had Paul Ansey down somewhere in my notes at some point in time. That was why I was trying to clarify that. Okay, well, I haven't discussed this with Councillor Hurley, who's agreed to chair this task and finish group. Councillor Hurley, have you any comments? Are you happy with these terms and conditions?
I sent some comments back to Gordon, and I don't know if he's seen them already. Maybe provide a response. I'm not sure if maybe somewhere else within the terms of reference this is picked up. On the question was, I think we collectively have a responsibility to ensure that the leisure facilities throughout West Berkshire are accessible to not so much the whole of West Berkshire. My thought was, I said to Gordon, we'll probably get into detail, are there any black holes? Are there any areas within West Berkshire, any wards where facilities are considerably lower than other areas? I think if we can pick that up through this, it would be something good to say to residents pan West Berkshire. Yes, we've considered that, and we've made sure that there isn't one area or one group of residents that are disadvantaged as opposed to others.
Okay, Gordon, do you think that's included in this in your terms, your proposed terms?
We could potentially just tweak it just to bring that out, but I think it is broadly in there, yes.
That's what I said. It's probably captured, but it was just a clarification point, if anything.
Yeah, okay, fine. So I've already asked Councillor Dillon for a Liberal Democrat, and he's volunteered Councillor Paddington. So that will happen. And Councillor, is he still here?
I think Masters dropped off.
I'm looking for Councillor Masters.
He did advise, didn't he?
He did advise him. He did advise he had a bad connection, but he did actually say, and he sent it to me in writing, that he was happy to participate. And we have yet to allocate a second conservative to that group. As I said, the membership doesn't have to be from OSMC. We can bring it in from outside the commission, or indeed even outside the council if we so wish. So we'll put that together over the next few days on the team. And I think what I'd like to do is to ensure as a follow-up action, if it's okay with you again, Howard, that Councillor Hurley meets with your good self and Matt Pierce ASAP to scope out how you're going to all work together. That's acceptable. I see that, Tyler. Okay.
Yeah. I'll just say, Chairman, I would actually, well, I personally welcome the OSMC Task and Village Group involvement. There's clearly a lot going on at the moment on the leisure side. And just to reflect what was said earlier, clearly I think the East District is probably under provided compared to the West, and that's something that's very high on the agenda.
Well, we have the chairman is from the East, he's from Pineborn. So good. Okay, if that's just noted, then that action recorded, Gordon, I'd like to move on then to the next item.
We have some people.
Chairman, I think
Just
three of us might want to speak, I think. I know I do and Tony does.
I'm sorry, I had, my system is not allowing me to look at participants.
That's okay. I know that Councillor Vickers had his hand up before me, Chairman, and we're
I've
the only two left.
Yeah, you're there. Councillor Vickers, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Because I've been off OSMC for some time, and when you refer to Appendix A, giving the terms of reference, the words terms of reference weren't there. I mean, I think one could stitch together what I would call a terms of reference, but maybe the system's been changed. I mean, I like the questions to be answered, but anyway, that's a minor point. As you may know, I'm the council's one and only rep on the Local Access Forum, and I know they've been discussing the feeling that it was very commercially focused, and although there are some words in the strategy about the use of the rights of way network and so on, several members of the forum felt that there were activities that weren't mentioned at all. Now, this is maybe the business of the task force. And I didn't actually catch the name that Councillor Dillon had volunteered. I didn't know whether it was my name or one of my colleagues.
Eric.
It's Eric. Yes, well, that's fine because he's our shadow portfolio holder. But I've got a great interest in this, in if you like, the non-commercial side. So I'm wondering if, in terms of reference, there's any possibility for other members or indeed other individuals with an interest to feed into this exercise.
I think what you should do, Councillor Vickers, is make sure that Councillor Patton, as your representative, as well.
Okay.
Those points. Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you for the advice there, Chairman. But you're quite right. We're feeding them in via Eric. I think Councillor Hurley makes a great point about black hole areas, but whilst that can be done almost as a desktop exercise in terms of facilities, what I'd also be keen for the task group to have a look at in terms of the strategy is about actually being able to deliver the sports. You can have all the football pitches you want, but if you haven't got football coaches coming through, then you won't have the coaches of the future to train people. So I wonder a health check there as well. So not just do we have the facilities, but do we have the network in place as well to actually support grassroots sports, and coaching and training.
I agree. I think that's probably covered in some of the key questions, but nevertheless, you've made it more specific, and that's valid. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. I actually lost for a while my participants list, so I couldn't see any hands up, and every time I clicked on participants, my screen went blank. I seem to be stabilized back again. Okay, fine. Again, let me move on. Gordon, if you could just minute the actions on that, please, I'd appreciate it. Item 10 is the understanding items now, is the revenue finance performance Q3. So we've just finished Q4, and we're now looking back here in OSMC at Q3. We shall... Melanie, I think that's you again. Do you want to take us through the presentation? Or what
yeah. Do you want anything on the screen?
Well, I think we should have a few of the charts on the screen because I think that's what you're going to talk to mainly, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, just move along a bit. perhaps start at 4.5, I think. Yeah, that's a useful one. Okay, so as outlined in my previous report, the overall forecast underspend is interlinked to the use of the COVID resources that have been provided by central government. The Q3 forecast is a £3.4 million underspend. However, that is after all the government support we have received. As the graph that you can see there shows how the underspend is split per directorate, with nearly all of it being in the People Directorate. The largest savings we've seen have been in demand services, particularly in social care. And we have seen a decrease in that demand as a result of COVID-19. So I wasn't actually planning on going through any more of the report, because I think that's the key point. Is just we're at a £3.4 million underspend, and it's as a result of the COVID grants and the decrease in demand-led services. So really, I'm happy to take any questions from this point.
Okay.
Just for public record, Chairman, sorry, I won't be making any comment on this, the next couple of items, because we discussed them at executive a couple of weeks ago. So they're public record, it's on public record in another meeting format.
Okay, fine. Does anyone else have any questions or any points they'd like to make about this? No. Not at all. Yeah, I would like to make a point, actually, because it was recorded in the minutes of one of our last meetings. Page 12 of the minutes, where we as a commission requested that any changes that were made in the budget should be highlighted. Any changes in the last quarter should be highlighted and explained. And I noticed that on the last page, we've got the original budget and the current budget, but we haven't enacted that action, Melanie. So can you ensure that going forward next year?
Yeah, I have got a note to do that, because I'd already prepared the Q3 report. I think before that action even came out, I've got that ready to do for the Q4 report. So okay. Yes.
Well, that's fine. Well, Councillor Dillon and I, after this meeting, probably in the next few days, we're going to rearrange the dates of, I'm told we can now do that, rearrange the dates of OSMC for the next months to try and get ourselves more in line with the executive as far as these financial reports are concerned, because we're getting these several weeks and sometimes several months after the event. Okay, that was the only comment I had on that.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyone else? If not, then we move on to the capital.
Councillor Cole.
I'm sorry, I've got Councillor Wollaston has basically told me my collar was up and I was looking scruffy. Thank you very much for that, Hard. Appreciate it.
Well, that wasn't what I was going to say.
Okay.
Sorry.
Capital. Who's taking us through the report?
Okay, sorry, I do have a question. It's just something I didn't understand. Annualized clients for ASC long-term services. Am I in the right report? I think I am. On the left-hand side of that graph, at the bottom of the y-axis, you've got y-axis.
Which page are you on, James, so we can all have a look?
74.
Okay. Go ahead.
I didn't understand May 04, June 04, June 04, July 04, August 04, and so on. What does it all mean here? I understand the 20 reference on the other axis.
Oh, okay. Yes, that shouldn't say 04. Yeah, that should have been corrected. It's supposed to be client numbers up the side. So completely wrong.
I guessed it might be. It's just come out wrong, the formatting.
Yes. Yeah, we'll get that reformatted for next time. It's literally supposed to be those numbers. So you can see the number 1696. It should say that on the left-hand side. Go up like that.
Well, back a bit on page 71, then 4.7. How do you have an underspend in garden waste subscriptions, given that they're an income?
That's just the way we refer to it. It is an overachievement of income.
Yes. Yeah. It's
all
right. I give up.
We can make that clearer. Yeah.
It's local government accounting, James. It's all upside down. Anyway, you're going to be awarded the Pamela Bale Award for spotting the error. Well done. Okay. Let me see what is next. Performance report. It's Catlin.
I think it's capital, Chairman.
Sorry?
I think it's the capital financial report.
Oh, I thought we'd just done that. No, you're
Just revenue.
You're absolutely right. Thank you for getting me on, keep me on track. It's capital first before we go to the performance. Yes, capital. Who's doing that one? Shannon?
It is me. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Chairman. The capital report, would you like it on screen?
I think so, if you can do that.
Could we move to point 5.3, Gordon, as a starting point? So if I start at 5.3, because this has the table, which is probably the key table to look at. And it shows the quarter 3 position of a £5.3 million forecast underspend across the programme as at quarter 3. And 5.4 draws your attention to that. That's already after 7.3 million of reprofiling that was undertaken at quarter 2 into the 21-22 budget build process. Moving on to 5.5, these next 3 sections just take you through the drivers for the various directorate positions. The key being in 5.5 people, the education service. They've had various delays on feasibility studies and projects, which is driving the communities or people directorate position. We move into 5.6, the place directorate. It's predominantly being driven through by the development and planning service, which is one key project, 4 Houses Corner, that is driving that directorate position. And in 5.7, the key drivers of the resources position is underspends across ICT and finance. These are predominantly due to, in ICT, the superfast broadband project, and in finance, it's delays on the corporate maintenance budgets. That, in summary, is the report, and I was happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. Anyone? Oh, no points. No one's making anything.
Tony's got his hand up, Chairman.
Oh yeah. Okay, Tony.
Yes, 4 Houses Corner. It's a lot of money. Is this COVID related, or I know it's got all sorts of problems by its nature, that project. Are you able to say why the underspend is there?
The underspend isn't actually being driven by COVID. It's due to the historical issues on this particular project.
Okay, say no more. Right.
Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, I think we've all been through that before. Okay, well, I'd like to note that report and then move on, please, to the 2021 performance report for quarter 3. Atlin.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. I'm Catalin Bogos. I'm the Performance and Risk Manager for West Berkshire Council. I'm introducing the performance report for quarter 3 to inform the Commission about the progress made in delivering the Council strategy. And I will briefly comment on 4 aspects that are covered by the report. Firstly, the external.
Do you want to put a few screens up, or?
We can. I will provide a broad introduction of the report, and then we can put the screen up if we need to look at particular points in the report, because I think what I'm going to say will describe the performance overall as a summary rather than particular specific points.
Okay,
so
go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. So I was saying that I will try to cover this in four sections. Firstly, we will talk a bit about the external context of the organization, and we had a few items on the agenda that have already gave you a glimpse of that earlier. Then performance against the core business components of the council strategy. Targeted measures. A third domain, performance against the council strategy priorities for improvement. And then I will finalize by referring to the internal context briefly. So the first element, the external context. Unfortunately, COVID-19 continues to be the headline for October and December quarter as external context factor. However, to put things in perspective, the district had low rates of infections and deaths comparing with other local authorities in the country. We were in the lowest 25% of local authorities. Nevertheless, there is an impact, and work with communities continued and continues to ensure vulnerable residents were supported. Colleagues earlier mentioned the community hub as being key in coordinating the support. As a note here, we need to continue to follow the measures and the restrictions to maintain this relatively good position for the district. The key measures on the local economy show resilience. We have up to Q2 last year data. And the council is monitoring, though, the impact on town centers and on the employment of young people. And we're trying to implement mitigation actions such as securing work placements to support in these areas. For social care, there is a reduction in demand, as my colleague a little bit earlier, Melanie, highlighted also in her financial return. In particular, a reduction in safeguarding inquiries in adult social care compared to the same quarters of the previous 2 years. So Q3 1 year ago, Q3 2 years ago, we have less inquiries. But on the background of the seasonal increase from Q1 and 2 of this financial year. However, lower level than usual, as I said. The focus of the children and adult social care services was to ensure that safeguarding issues are still identified and they don't remain hidden just because there are some measures around lockdown and so on. Secondly, we move to the regarding the core business performance. The message is the same as at Q2, even if officer resource have been focused on the COVID-19 response, the performance remains strong. Some benchmarking data started to be published during this Q3, and we included that data into the report. It shows the previous financial year very good results indeed in the top quartile nationally. We expect more comparative information to come forward and to be able to include it in Q4 report. We have covered in this domain last quarter the issues about tax collection, core business performance being behind the trajectory. And we mentioned it there, and we repeat it now a bit to say that it is a result of the local authorities' effort to support the residents and businesses. I will move now to the third component of our performance report and framework, the performance against the harder domain of priorities for improvement, more challenging to deliver and achieve. The Council services continue the efforts to deliver improvements and indeed improved outcomes for residents too in this area too. We list in the report some examples such as accommodation offer for all rough sleepers or progressing with some of the strategic framework such as very important mention at the first item on the agenda tonight, the communication and engagement strategy that has been approved during Q3. Data for some performance measures was not available at the end of Q3. And if I mention the education attainment, including the education attainment gap, we know that exams have not taken place as usual. Traffic flow information, again, there were some data not reported because of focusing on COVID response. However, wherever possible, the services continue to support improvements in the particular areas. And for example, we will, with the lack of exam data, the education service has not waited, and they continue to support to keep the schools open for vulnerable pupils and for key workers' children. We know of initiatives to support children, young people working from home to be able to access remote education with technology. A couple of areas are rated red, and we highlighted them to the executive and highlight them here. One of those is the affordable homes completions. We have the figures now for the last year, 22 units below the target of 125. There is an exception report at the end of the performance report in appendix, and we say there that there is dependency on the building industry in terms of how many homes are being built and when. And the council's policies, they go beyond the national framework in terms of the requirements for affordable homes. And what we know from the data that we have in the services, that we do have approximately 900 units that have already planning permission as affordable homes, but it depends on when they will be built. Another area to highlight is the one around rural afforestation and urban tree planting. There are some delays, and the work will be reprioritized as part of the environment strategy delivery plan because this has been completed. This area being an important factor in our efforts to achieve the carbon reduction targets for 2030. There are other 7 measures listed in Appendix B with the exception reports providing the details why they are behind schedule, behind target. Primarily, these are milestones for completing particular pieces of work that show some delays. The maximum likely delay that is highlighted there is 12 months, but most of them we are talking about delays for 3 to 6 months. And for that reason, we can confirm that the improvement agenda continues, and despite all the external factors and pressures, things continue to be delivered. You will understand that rather than, for example, one of those is, you can see in appendix, developing a community engagement framework. Well, the priority of the officers currently is to actually work with the communities right now to provide the urgent support needed. But as I said, plans are still being progressed. They are still on the to-do list and they are being attended to. The final category, and I will finalize the introduction, internal context. We reflect the budget underspend that my colleague already covered in the item before me. And then we also highlight the stable workforce and reduced sickness levels. I will stop here. I'm happy to take any comments or questions so that the Commission can approve the recommendations to note the progress made in the delivery of the Council strategy.
Yes, thank you, Kathleen. Let me say it's a very difficult time to be gathering data and statistics and trying to compare and track. So realize it's a lot of difficult job you've got at the moment. It's not an easy job at the best of times, but difficult at the moment. I think we all recognize and appreciate that. I've got Councillor Vickers and Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Chairman. Both my questions, as you'd probably expect, Chairman, are in development and planning area where there are at least a couple of reds. I'm not so concerned about the shortfall in numbers completed, because there are explanations to that. My comment on the affordable housing one is it does seem to be a very high proportion, 900, of those with planning permission that aren't yet completed. Is there a sense that developers are leaving the affordable housing delivery till last on some developments? Is it a cash flow issue, and maybe towards the end, oh dear, we can't afford it, can we please be excused the numbers? That's my suspicion. And I see you smiling, Chairman. And the other question is, again, the big shortfall in numbers of planning applications that are determined within the target dates. It's not so much that it's a shortfall, but that we're in the fourth quartile. If that's COVID related, we haven't suffered from COVID as much as the rest of the country. This is surely a national trend, or is there something particular to what we're doing or not doing, or what our developers are not responding to? So can we have an explanation to that? Because I couldn't see the second one of those. I couldn't see, maybe I've missed it in the appendices, but I couldn't see an explanation in there to that one.
Can you take that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Vickers. Thank you, Chairman. So firstly, with the planning, with the affordable homes, planning applications are given to sites, and it depends on when the developers decide to start building on the particular sites. And as I said, and as it is listed in the exception report, the expectations for West Berkshire Council in terms of the proportion of affordable homes is higher than the national framework recommendation. So that's one point. Another point in terms of leaving it towards the end, yes, I think there are situations where the developers will finalize their developments with the affordable homes. I will not be able to say that they are not building them because they have them on the to-do list. In terms of the planning application benchmarking, what we are providing in the table in the report, we are providing some historic data about 2 years ago where our performance was below comparator groups. But since then, and I think it was as a result of our efforts to look at service improvements and new ways of working, the development service has revised the targets, revised the procedures, and I think we have very good performance for the last financial year, 2019-20, and the results for this financial, up to the Q3 of this financial year, again, they are significantly better than 2 years ago. On that area, we are expecting the benchmarking information to be released, and we will bring it for 2019-20, and we'll bring it as soon as that is released national. We'll bring it here into the, we'll include it into the report.
Okay, Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you. It was a point, Kathleen, you made about, I think it was the consultation and the engagement strategy, and being delayed because the team's actually delivering stuff at the moment with a COVID focus. I just wonder if we could just have a sort of one-page briefing paper that says what strategies we've got coming through the pipeline, and when they're likely to fall. So just a reprofiling of them. I don't even care if they've shifted really, and I know that the reasons why our staff have been redeployed. It's just be good to see it all in one place. I think what we have seen a lot of over the last year is lots of various strategies and council documents. I think if we could have all of those, as I said, in just a one-page report, and then the anticipated dates of that next round, that would certainly be useful for me. Thanks.
Thank you. If I may, Chairman, to respond. So the communication and engagement strategy has been approved, and that's a important document to coordinate the better engagement with communities, and has the 3 strands on communication, consultation, and actual engagement. The one that is still to be approved is a community engagement strategy that we want to be not the council strategy, but a strategy together with our partners in the community, and we are depending on them.
Yeah, that's why but our strategies have been delayed because of COVID, and that's been because officers' time has been diverted to that, and that's fine. I think it'd be useful to capture that though, where they have been, and a roadmap of just what the strategies are that are likely to come out, sort of outside of the forward plan slightly, leader. Because we know if we've got a strategy already written till 2023, the chances are we're going to be wanting to have a new strategy in 2023, 2024, aren't we? It'd just be interesting to see that mapped out.
Okay.
If I may comment on this, yes, I will bring something in terms of the remaining strategies to be updated or written. The majority of the strategies that are in the council strategy delivery plan that detail further the strategic framework and the approach that we take, I think the majority of them we actually have delivered. They are accessible in one place if anyone wants to see them using a internet search engine, searching West Berkshire policies and strategies. They will find them on one page. We'll try to put them in there, but I will take the point for the remaining ones to provide details in terms of expected date to be completed.
Just as Councillor Dillon's asking for, just no more than one-page summary, just to pull it off. If the information's already there on the website, nice and easy for you to do, then that would be great. Be great. Thank you. And if you see a little bit, I think we comment on some of those strategies when we're looking at the forward plan here anyhow, which I've got no other questions on this point. So I think that your report is noted, Captain. Thank you very much indeed. And
thank you.
I'd like to move on to now to the forward plan. And this covers the period of 15th of April to the 31st of July. Members, you're invited to note the items on the forward plan and consider whether OSMC wishes to review any of these items prior to the relevant meeting. Unless anybody's got anything straight away, what I suggest is you drop me a line if there's anything you feel you want to talk about. Tony, I see you waving. Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, I mean, I see that the local plan is still down for the annual council meeting, but you and I know, Chairman, that it's substantially delayed, and I'm wondering, it's only sort of a week away from publishing the agenda for the meeting where that should be decided, but it's not going to be decided, and shouldn't we have an update by now on when it will be decided?
I don't know, Leader, have you any comment to make on that?
It's a fair point, Councillor Vickers. My understanding it's coming to the July council. So
yeah, that was my understanding.
Yeah,
yes.
So this plan needs to reflect that. So we need an amendment.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much. Okay. So that's noted. And anybody who wants anything, just drop me a line, as I said. So they move on to the OSMC work program. A few comments on here. Again, members, you're invited to review that work program. But there's been some minor changes to the program. The leisure strategy that we already mentioned tonight has already been delayed and may not be available. We hope to try and we get report back, the task group report back by July. So that may actually, probably may not happen, and we'll have to slip that. The new Health and Overview and Scrutiny Committee may wish to consider the joint health and well-being strategy. And I think they should do that instead of this, of it coming to instead of OSMC doing that. I don't know how the rest of you feel about that, but you know, I'm of the view if we set up a specialist committee, they should, they're better placed than the rest of us. And provided they just give us a brief report back, I'm quite happy with that. The economic development strategy is also being updated to take account of the effects of COVID. So it's proposed that this is going to be pushed back to so the review is 12 months after adoption. And finally, the Council is preparing an equalities and diversity strategy, which I think OSMC may wish to consider in lieu of the report on inequalities. So we had an inequalities report, which is in the programme due to come to OSMC in October. And I think I would recommend that we look at the equalities and diversity strategy instead of that. They're quite similar. Has anybody any comments on any of those recommendations? Any comments? No, I shall.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Just one. Sorry, the inequalities in West Berkshire is different from an equality and diversity one, because there's a E&D piece of work that Nick's leading on, isn't there?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but is that E&D within the corporate council as opposed to inequalities within West Berkshire?
Nick, do you want to comment on that? That's a good question.
Yeah, it's both. So I think the strategy will give you that outward look, which is why I think it's better that do take the strategy rather than ask for a separate paper to be done. I think there'll be a lot of duplication, but it will be able to look in and out.
Okay.
Okay.
Then,
good.
yeah, happy with that then, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, well, I think we're all business has now been concluded. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending the meeting. Yes.
Sorry, I was having a conversation with a member of the public a couple of days ago about the scrutiny programme and the fact that adult social care doesn't seem to appear on here and hasn't appeared on here for the previous year. So it could give the appearance that OSMC aren't going to look at it at all. But the point I've made is one, that the work programme can change. And as certain things come to light, you know, we might call those in and do a special review on them, but also that the COVID review that we want done is going to be a huge piece of work, and you know it's going to be as big as this commission is in its own right, probably. You know, and it's going to take time to report. And I think a lot of the adult social care, or some of the adult social care concerns, will be picked up under that strand as well. And I did just say to the member of the public, I would reiterate that in this meeting tonight, just for that public awareness that we're all, and I know that the leader was nodding her head then, that, you know, we're all committed to a thorough review of COVID within West Berkshire.
No, absolutely. In fact, I'd reinforce that. If my memory serves me right, when I sat down about 12 months ago to look at the forward program, which, if you remember, we had a very in-depth review of adult social care about 18 months ago. And when we sat down about 12 months ago to look at the forward program, I think we had it coming up for review right about now. But obviously, events
pushed him.
It would be irrelevant to do that. So we haven't forgotten. And it has been impacted, as you say. It's carried the major the blunt of the impact on COVID. So yeah, it'll be there. I think we can assure any members of the public listening. Councillor Vickers, Tony.
Yeah, it's on the same subject really, and Councillor Dillon knows because we had a discussion, and in fact I was involved with the same correspondence with a member of the public on this. Now that we've got a health and wellbeing scrutiny committee, I feel that a lot of the adult social care scrutiny, because after all you're dealing with care, you're dealing with an important aspect of wellbeing, that might be a better place where you've got the expertise and the membership to scrutinise adult social care. Just leave that thought with you, unless people have got a comment straight away.
Leave it with me. I'll leave it.
Okay.
No, that's an interesting one. The two things coming together. Interesting. Okay. Well, I think we've we've completed the program for tonight, and all I would say is, could I ask all panelists to remain in the virtual meeting and not to leave Zoom until the host has confirmed the meeting is no longer being live streamed.